Welcome to TalentedTester.com. Wayne Vassell here, and the topic today is what is a sprint in Agile? So sprint is an iteration of time box work that is used within the Scrum framework of Agile. Typically, these sprints are short sprints, which are small modularized pieces of development which are done and tested. So, what is the difference between a scrum and a sprint? Now, in some cases, people may get these confused, but effectively, they're very different. A scrum is typically done on a daily basis, and it's an opportunity for the team members to get together to make sure they're still on track for the sprint, to work through any challenges they may have had the day before, and to focus their attention on what needs to be done for that particular day. It's usually a very short 15 to 30 minutes get together, and then you continue with the rest of the day, and the main focus is on the sprint itself. So what is an agile sprint cycle? Effectively, a sprint cycle is a timed boxed section of time where you will actually perform the tasks that are agreed within the sprint. So effectively, a sprint cycle is almost just like saying a sprint in itself, and this is what happens on a sprint cycle. So what is agile sprint planning? So sprint planning is effectively a collaborative effort which typically involves what is called a scrum master, for those of you that are familiar with the framework of Scrum. And the idea is for the scrum master to be the linchpin really and facilitate the planning of upcoming sprints, and clarifies all of the backlog items in the product backlog that are going to be used to the actual sprint itself. So what actually goes into a sprint? So for a sprint, it is a agreed selection of backlog items that you plan to do. Now obviously the very specific task that you do is subjective to the project that you're working on, but let's say for example that you are building out a new graphical user interface in this particular sprint for a large banking application, then maybe you'll have 2 weeks to work on that graphical user interface, and that will be the focus of the first 2 weeks. The day-to-day scrums will make sure that you're on track for the sprint goal, which is effectively to come out with the graphical user base at the end of that sprint. And effectively, that would be an example of something that goes into a sprint. Now again, a sprint could be anything depending on what your project is, but that's just an example of what activities could be happening in with that sprint. And bear in mind that sprint will have the development that will take place, and you'll also have some testing that will happen as well within that sprint. So all parties have an interest in the scrums and to go through what happens within the sprint. So how long does a sprint usually last? Well, as you can imagine, there is a bit of subjectivity here because it depends on your individual project, or how your company works. But the average is about 2 weeks. It can be shorter, it can be a week, or it could even be longer. It's not recommended to have really long sprints because the whole beauty of Agile is to have quick sprints and then get quick feedback and quick iterations. So to cut a long story short, 2 weeks is the average, but you could be looking anywhere from 1 week to 4 weeks, but most people go for 2 weeks. So let's look at some related questions that usually pop up around this particular topic. First question being, what is a sprint backlog? A sprint backlog is effectively a list of tasks that have been identified in what's going to be delivered throughout the entire project of the Agile project. So each sprint is an agreed list of work items that are going to be delivered within that, for example, that 2 week sprint, that are taken from the sprint backlog. So effectively, this could be a document which has got all of the pieces of work and development that are going to be done throughout the entire project, whereas a sprint focuses on a very small subset of that which has been agreed to be delivered. So what is a sprint forecast? A sprint forecast is a Scrum guide that kind of refers to what will actually be delivered throughout the project itself. So this is largely reliant on the product backlog and the items that are selected for each sprint. So it gives you a kind of forecast of where you're going and where you're going to get to with your actual project. Now, what is a Confluence sprint planning template? Now, if you're into the world of agile, then maybe you've come across Confluence before. Effectively, Confluence is a collaboration tool that is used to help teams to collaborate and share their knowledge. And the sprint planning template is just a template within this tool which enables agile teams to work more effectively together, and effectively that's what it is. So thank you very much for coming across this video and checking this out. If you're looking for any free exam questions or samples, please feel free to hop over to talentedtester.com and pick those up for free. Or if you would like more in-depth knowledge on agile or any other test related topics, then pop over to talentedtester.com, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side. Thank you.